I'm, gosh, I sat over here, Ms. Meijer, Hank, Doug, Mark. I am so touched because, as you know, it was only months ago that I went through the same thing with my mom. And I'm honored today to stand up here and humbled to try to just say a few words which I know my parents would want to say if they were alive today, because Lena, the relationship they had with you and Fred meant a lot to them, and they respected him so much for what he did in life, a life well lived. And if Mom or Dad were here today, they would tell you they cherish their friendship with both of you. It's hard to stand here. When I got the call and Hank and I talked and found out what happened the day after Thanksgiving, and it reminded me of what our family went through 6 years ago with Dad, and it was the day after Christmas that he passed away. And I said to Hank on the phone, I said, what a blessing that you got to spend one more Thanksgiving with your dad. And we had to get one more Christmas with my dad before he passed away. And I was just so trying to encourage Hank and lift him up and remind him of that. And here several months ago, you know, my mother, when she passed away, and she figured out a way to be buried on Dad's birthday. And the kids all said, we knew Mom had control issues to the end. And I think of your father, Black Friday, I mean, that's that's pretty good, Hank. He might have outdone Mom, I'm not sure. So, Ms. Meijer, I have to tell you, and you probably don't even know the story, you probably remember it, you and Fred hosted my parents out at Meijer Gardens, and Dad used to tell this story all the time. If you talk to Marty Allen, he'll tell you the same thing. He had such a wonderful day with you guys, and he always talked about it, and he talked about the tram ride. I didn't know Dad loved trams, but he loved the tram ride with you all, and I honestly, I don't think it was a tram ride. I think it was the cherished relationship that Mom and Dad had with both you and Fred. So we thank you for that. I said to Hank and Mark and Doug that so many similarities that I see between your dad and my dad. And my dad, everybody knows, he was a congressman and a public servant and loved serving West Michigan and loved serving people, and that was what your dad did. He loved serving people. He was a people person. And when you talk to anybody out here today, what Fred Meijer did to invest in the people and the places and the community here in West Michigan and Grand Rapids. I looked in the paper the other day online, and I live in California, and I was looking online, and it was 3 columns. You know, it started with the Urban League and Goodwill Industries and all the universities in Grand Valley, and you know, the list went on and on and on of all the charities and his generosity to reinvest in his community and the people, the neighbors, the people he cared about. And I can tell you from Mom and Dad, if they were standing here today, they will never be able to thank him for his generosity of helping Dad put that museum and library together to celebrate my father's legacy. And Fred was always, you know, one of the first ones to be there. It didn't matter the project or what it was, whether it was the Berlin Wall, he jumped right in. Your family was so connected with the Saigon ladder that was on the embassy in Vietnam, and getting that over here for the museum, and the great seal above the presidential seal above the steps there. And most recently, Fred jumped right in, and the statue of my father that now is in the rotunda in the Capitol, and he'll be the last president to have a statue go in the rotunda. So our family is so grateful for his generosity to my father's legacy, and we can't thank you enough. Hank, you and I laughed on the phone the other day, and there's so many similarities between your dad and mine, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but we're a small group here today, so I was very touched when I read in the paper how much your dad was like my dad, and I saw that it said that after you kids were raised, that your parents stayed in their modest house and lived there for years, and your father always drove a modest car for years and years and was very frugal. And I hope I'm sure he got much better treatment at the dinner table than my father got, because I remember my father had a tendency, and Mother would remind him of this, that sometimes he kept his suits too long after they went out of style, or his ties, and Mom would always say, she said, "Jerry, you're just cheap, Jerry," and Dad, in his good ways, would say, "Betty, I'm not cheap. I am just thrifty with a good Midwestern background," and that's the way he lived his life. And I think your father and mine were very similar in that way, and they came from that greatest generation. The other thing, and my heart goes out to you because it's tough. These three boys, Miss Meijer, you two, all of you had to share your husband, your father at times, with all of us. And I know that feeling. I know that when you have a father who loves the commitment to his community, his friends, his neighbors, to help out, to be of service, that you have to give up a little piece of him at times. And I remember when Dad was president, when he was a congressman, vice president, I remember being a little kid, and my dad would sometimes be gone 150 nights a year. And as a little boy, I can remember just sort of, I'll be honest with you, being jealous, sort of jealous that other people got him and he was out there. And then there was a little guilt about being jealous because he was out doing such great things. And I understand that feeling, but that's okay. Because that's why we love our fathers. Because they have that great quality, that great character of integrity of wanting to go out and reach out and help others and be there and be of service. And our fathers, it adds more value to their life, and it adds more value to our families, more depth, because we had these great fathers. So I share that feeling with you, and I know what it feels like to go out and have to share your father with so many others. Lena, I'll be very candid with you. One of the highlights of my year was a couple months ago. Your son Hank invited me to sit down with your husband for a couple hours, and I can't tell you the joy that I got from that, because I sat there and I felt like I was looking at my dad. He had that great smile. He was humble. He told these wonderful stories about growing up in Michigan, and brought tears to my eyes to think about it. And he was always so hopeful. When I sat with Fred, he was so hopeful about the future and people and the potential in people. And I walked out of that room, and I've got to tell you, Hank, I thank you for allowing that to happen, and to hear those stories from your father. And I walked out, and I thought, this is a man of great character, this leadership. And again, it reminded me of my father, and it made me think back several years ago. My dad was talking to me about leaders and leadership, and he said, great leaders need to connect. You need to connect if you're going to influence someone's life and lift them up. And he told me a story. This is several years ago, and it made me, when I walked out of the meeting with your dad and the visit, I thought of this story. And Dad used the analogy of trains in a train yard and locomotives and an engine. And he said, great leaders are like locomotives looking down on a train yard, and there's all these cars in the train yard, and they have potential value. They're sitting there, they're not moving, but they have potential value. They have, but a great leader, like an engine, like a locomotive, backs down into that train yard. And he backs up, and he connects, and he hooks up, and he finds out where that train car needs to go to have the greatest value. And that's what leaders do.
And your husband, your father, was a great leader. And he had that gift. He had that gift of connecting with people, listening, being patient, finding out what they needed, and helping them and giving them a hand up. And that's just a wonderful quality. I was sitting over there remembering when Mom passed away a couple months ago, and a man walked up to me afterwards, and I was wiping some tears from my eyes, and the service was over, and he walked up, and to this day, I still don't know who it was, but he said to me something I'll never forget and take away with me. He said, son, he says, you know you never owned your mom. You didn't own her. Your brothers, your two brothers, your sister, and you didn't own your mom. She was just on loan. You were borrowing her from God. And he said, son, the tears you're crying today.
And you lost a great one. You lost a great one. I think I can say today safely, thinking about what Mark, Doug, and the family's going through. They're not, I went through this myself with Dad's funeral. There's so many great things to remember about their father, but they're not sitting here today remembering the great business he built, or the thousands of jobs that he created that those families needed, or the schools and universities and hospitals that he generously gave millions of dollars to, or all the people he helped up. And that's not probably what you're thinking about today. Your greatest loss, your greatest value today is the loss of your father and husband, as a leader of your family. How your dad showed you how to be a great father, how he showed you how to be a great husband. And proof of that is 60 plus years of marriage, a wonderful relationship. How he mentored you, how he tried to give you character and integrity. That's your greatest loss. And we're here for you. We love you. We miss Fred. And we just thank you for sharing your father and your husband with us. God bless you.